Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Braca Reap Ember the 21st. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of DL2 Dragons of Flame by Douglas Niles. That's right, Dragons of Flame, the second module in the DragonLance Saga way back in 1984. Of course, this is the 40-year anniversary, so I don't know if you know this or not, I'm having a bit of a get-together of individuals who are passionate about Dragonlance, like you and myself, collecting up images, videos, audio bites, artwork, anything that you would want to contribute to help share your love of this wonderful campaign setting for Dungeons & Dragons. Go ahead and shoot it to info@dlsaga.com. You can always just visit dlsaga.com, my website, and it will have the link right there, the first thing you see. And you can learn more about the celebration that I'm doing. And it's all going to be released on November 1st to coincide with the release 40 years ago of Dragons of Autumn Twilight. Now, Dragons of Flame is actually part of the story in Dragons of Autumn Twilight. It's sort of the second quarter of the entirety of the story. And I've already reviewed and done a playthrough of DL1 Dragons of Despair. So next, Deceit, I'm sorry. And next is going to be this bad boy right here. So I've got a game set up, an Advanced Dungeons & Dragons game set up starting this next weekend in 1 week, where we're going to be running through the adventure module Dareguard Keep, which is from DL16 World of Krynn. After that, we're going to pop into this, DL2 Dragons of Flame. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be using the actual characters in the modules. So, the Heroes of the Lance, they're still pretty low level. But that's going to be a lot of fun, sort of after I reviewed it, to then run through it and see how accurate it is compared to the actual novel. And that's kind of the discussion that I'm going to have today. How accurate is DL2 Dragons of Flame to the portion of the novel that it is in relation to? And I have to start off by saying, not much. And this is what I loved about these modules, is that, well, let's just go ahead and get into it. These, the novels were intentionally written to hide some of the content in the modules and change content from the modules so that if you did play the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons modules and read the novels, you couldn't just copy and paste and play the module or the novel itself, because the content is slightly different. There's going to be information that's completely different, and that's all intentional so as not to spoil anything for the game players or the novel readers, depending on which one you're coming in from. And so that's, I thought, pretty interesting. So, DL2 Dragons of Flame was released July 1984. And it was written by Douglas Niles, not Tracy Hickman. Now, Tracy Hickman was part of the team on Project Overlord that became Dragonlance, but ultimately, he's attributed, and Margaret Weiss, with creating Dragonlance. And while he did, sort of do the jump start with his wife Laura on the way over to Michigan in TSR, they are only two of an entire team that had a lot to do with creating what we know today as Dragonlance, especially when it comes to the modules. Tracy Hickman did not write most of the modules. Other people did. And Douglas Niles is one of those who, if you love Dragonlance, you need to thank Douglas Niles, because he had a huge role in shaping Dragonlance from the very beginning all the way to the end. So hats off to you, Douglas. I appreciate you, everything you've done. So anyway, this module falls in line with DL1, where it's very groundbreaking for the era that it was released. Nowadays, it's seen as common parlance because a lot of what Dragonlance put into Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was sort of incorporated in other campaign settings and other editions of the game. But it all stemmed right here in Dragonlance. Part of what was so great about it was that it included like the elven hymn, literal music sheet for when the heroes get to Qualinesti and meet up with Lorana and Porthios and the speaker. And, you get either sing or perform. I've already had the song. I paid some performers to actually make the song so that when I play through it, I'm just going to play that recording just like I did in DL1 with Goldmoon's hymn. So it's a nice way of immersing yourself in a module, not just with your characters, or in this case, the heroes of the lance and the story, but also with music and then the Canticle of the Dragon. So there's the Canticle of the Dragon actually changes throughout the course of the modules to include historical information and events that are much more recent with the rise of the dragon armies in Ansalon. And so you got to reflect on either the Canticle of the Dragon 1, which became 2 from DL1, and Canticle of the Dragon 2, which is in DL2, which actually became 1, I believe, in this module. It's very confusing and mixed up, but there are different versions of it. So, and let's just bring up the Canticle of the Dragon. So that's a poem that is intended to be read by the players at a specific moment in the campaign. And that, again, is just to immerse you. And that's something that most modules didn't do. Most D&D modules up until that point were dungeon crawling modules. And if they were overland adventures, then that's all they were, was overland adventures. So what the DL series did that was so different was not just, well, let me go through it. The isometric map designs was groundbreaking at the time that it was put out. And again, you can thank Tracy Hickman specifically for that, because he started that with Zach Saroth. So the entirety of the story of DL2 takes place when the heroes left Zach Saroth at the end of DL1, and they're headed back towards Solace after having defeated the Black Dragon Kasanth and collecting up the Discs of Mishikal. That is the base knowledge of all of the good gods of Krynn. And having that turns Goldmoon from a plainsman chieftain with the Staff of Mishikal as the only means of healing into an actual true cleric at the end of DL1. So now she's armed with the truth. She needs to find someone that can actually speak the language on these discs. And ultimately, you find that at the end of this module in Pax Tharkas with Elistan, the character NPC, who then later becomes one of the PCs that the players have to play in DL3. Or maybe it's DL4 that he becomes an actual player character. In any case, this is really couched between Zach Saroth and leaving Pax Tharkas. And again, this is all spoiler information, so if you don't want to know the module information or the changes, there's a few changes, then don't watch this. Go play the module, then come back, and I'll tell you all the spoiler information here. So the isometric map in this version, instead of being Zach Saroth like in DL1, is Pax Tharkas. And it only shows part of Pax Tharkas because, as you know, Pax Tharkas is this massive structure that sort of breaks up the canyon leading from Abanasinia down through the Carolise Mountains to Thorbarden. And this massive structure was built by elves, humans, and, well, mainly elves and dwarves together, when they signed the Sword Sheath Scroll to end battling each other and end the war against Ergoth. This is a sort of monument of peace. In this era, it was sort of taken over primarily by gully dwarves, but there's also like a contingent of dwarves that lived there for a very long time. In this era right now, it was taken over completely by the dragon armies. And the dragon armies are using it as a mine, which there were mines all up and down this entire road strip from Abanasinia down through the Carolise Mountains to Thorbarden that the Ergothian Empire originally was using in their last war before the Cataclysm. And all those mines were filled in. But as soon as Verminard and the Red Dragon Army took over Pax Tharkas, he turned it into a massive mining operation so that they could get iron ore out of the ground and make steel weapons and make steel armor. Like, that's literally the sole reason why he took that structure. One, it's a good defensible position for a wartime campaign, but also it's the only mine in the area. And precious metals like iron and steel are really sought after when you're this massively growing military force spreading yourself across an entire continent. You need continuous resources, and Pax Tharkas was a really great resource for the dragon armies. It's also a staging point. So in the box set of battle system, there's one scenario called the Battle of Qualinosti. And so this is where the Red Dragon army, led by Verminard, invades Qualinost and takes over Qualinosti. Well, you play on either side, and I played it with friend Derek, and I have it on the channel here in old AD&D battle system. And it's just this massive war simulator. And so what is alluded to in DL2, where Qualinosti is, and the speaker is terrified that these Red Dragon army is going to invade, and so they have to evacuate all of their people off to southern Aragoth with the Sylvanesti. That's a big point of the heroes coming and being collected and sort of saved by the elves, brought to Qualinost, and they're sort of told by the speaker, he's like, look, we're kind of screwed. We have to leave our ancient elven homeland because we have this massive military force bearing down on us, and they have dragons, and there's nothing we can do against dragons. They're freaking dragons. There hasn't been a dragon for 1,000 years, and now we've got a whole bunch of them at our doorstep. So we're screwed. So we have to leave, or they're going to burn down the entire forest, and we're going to have nothing left. But there's a lot of slaves. A lot of our people have been taken, and a lot of humans and dwarves and stuff have been taken, and they're being held captive in Pax Tharkas. So we're wondering if you, the heroes, would be willing to go to Pax Tharkas and maybe liberate these slaves while we're evacuating Qualinosti to southern Aragoth. And of course, the whole point of the heroes is to say, yes, of course we will rescue those slaves. And why wouldn't you want to? Because again, we start this adventure with them leaving Zaxxarath, heading towards Solace, and they immediately see smoke on the horizon. By this time, the Red Dragon army has taken all of northern, western, and eastern Abanasinia, including Solace, and they're pressing south, closing in on Qualinosti. So you, as a hero in this module, you're kind of terrified because you can do whatever you want. If you want to just head south, hope to connect up with the elves of Qualinosti, because again, that's where Tantalus comes from, Tannis half elven. Maybe you want to go do that. There's ways that the dungeon master is given sort of control by the module to redirect heroes in certain times, but they don't have to go to Solace. They can get caught, because ultimately, no matter what, you're in a war zone and you are outnumbered 1,000 to 1. So no matter what direction you go in, the war is already here. So you're going to be caught regardless. If you try to go south to Qualinosti, you're going to get caught immediately. If you head to Solace, you're not going to get caught initially because they don't know who and what you are. All they know is you're just refugees moving in. Hey, Darius, how you doing? Oh, it's great cover art too. That's the other part about all these modules. Just beautiful, beautiful art. Exterior and interior. The line art on the insides are just stunning. So the heroes ultimately are probably going to choose to go back to Solace because they're going to wonder what the hell happened to their home. That's where most of them have come from. And so once you get into Solace, you immediately realize that the Inn of the Last Home has been torn out of the vallenwood trees and put down onto the ground. And it's being actively used by the Dragon Army as an inn, as somewhere to eat food and get drink. And Lord Toda is much more powerful now. He is now actively working with Verminard. Instead of just trying to find the blue crystal staff, they've pretty much given up on that at this point. And now, since the war is here, in DL1 it was coming, now that the war is here, he's just collecting slaves for Pax Tharkas. His whole role has just sort of shifted, and he's doing everything he can to make sure that Verminard has the people he needs to have round-the-clock mining operations to then support their war effort. And the PCs come in, and immediately, it's pretty much like the novel, where they go into the inn. Eventually, like, you don't have to, but if you do go into the inn, you see the state that it's in. You see Tika, who is now doing her best to, pacify the new occupiers of Solace and the Dragon Army. Draconians are in here. Goblins are in here. Viewmaster Toda eventually comes in as well. But you also have characters like Hedrick the Theocrat, the douchebag number 1, who is ultimately taken as a slave. thankfully, because that dude definitely deserves it. As an aside, I'm 2/3 the way through with the Hedrick the Theocrat novel, and sweet hell, is that going to be a enraged filled review. It's going to be shocking. So most people won't, if you're a religious person, you're not going to want to watch that review, because I get into it, because it triggers me so bad. So anyway, the heroes ultimately are going to be discovered as outsiders or as the heroes from earlier, and they're going to be captured. It's inevitable. They're just simply outnumbered, outgunned. There's just no way, the level that they are, that they could stand up against the full force of dragon armies. And so they're captured. They're thrown in basically a caravan of cells, ostensibly, prison cells. And then that's when they find Gilthanas, and Gilthanas is being aided by Theros Ironfeld, and they literally cut Theros Ironfeld's arm off to punish him so he can no longer be the blacksmith, because he was helping hide elves from the dragon army. And then that's the first time that all of the companions get to actually, or I'm sorry, that's the time that everyone else gets to see magic for the first time ever in healing, when the heroes get to have the opportunity to stop Theros Ironfeld from dying. And if they don't do it, he will die. Like, that's it. So, you'll have to figure out another way down the line to get the Dragonlances forged when they finally get to Foghaven Vale. But hopefully they heal him, because they're not evil people, and they see someone in need, and Goldmoon's a lawful good character. So she would clearly want to help someone, especially since she has the ability to do it. Kind of like The Witcher when Temeria is occupied. I don't know anything about The Witcher, so I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. So once they get in the caravan, again, this is like a 4-game session module. It's very short. The very first DL1 was like a 4 session module as well. So these aren't meant to be massive campaigns. Together, they create a massive campaign, but they're basically released one a month throughout the year, in order for you and your group just to sort of have 1 month of adventures, and then you go on to the next module. So you get in the caravan almost immediately, probably by the first session, you're captured. And then Gilthanas is basically like talking to Tanis, and he doesn't hate Tanis like he does in the novels. They're pretty much indifferent, but they were raised together. They're like brothers, basically. And so they're sort of like chatting back and forth, and Gilthanas is willing to talk and reveal information about Qualinosti, because let's remember, no one in the modules at this point, because this is only the second module, no one knows anything about Qualinosti. It's a totally unknown region. In DL1, you weren't even allowed to go into it. If you tried to get in there, elves would literally stand guard with bows drawn, telling you to leave. If you come any further, we're going to make you a pincushion. And so you had no choice but not to know anything about Qualinosti until this module. And so it's basically a lore dump from Gilthanas telling all of the rest of the companions and the other slaves about this elven nation. And so when the heroes start making like attempts to escape, which any hero inevitably would want to try to escape, he's like, "Oh, simmer down. We're going to be fine. Let's just wait a little bit." Because he knows that there's elven freedom fighters just down the road waiting to liberate them. So he's just patiently waiting, telling a story while people are freaking out and holding each other and crying because they know the horrible fate that they're going to be faced with as slaves in Pax Tharkas. But Gilthanas has a little bit of information up in his head, and he's not telling anyone. He's keeping it close to the hand. In any case, ultimately, the elves come in and rescue, and Viewmaster Toda just runs away, pushing Sestin, the little gully dwarf. He's like, "Oh, stop the heroes!" And he just flees on his fat, chubby pony, who's like under the weight of the fat, chubby Toda. He just runs away immediately, so you can't really get revenge on him, unfortunately. But this is when we should probably talk about the reality of the bad guys. There's something called like mysterious deaths. Let me see if I can find the note of it, because they have a specific phrase for it. But basically what it means is there are characters that are going to come up again, like NPCs and enemies, in future modules. So you cannot kill them off. So if the heroes do actually kill them, you have to make it like mysterious. There has to be something where they can't just see the dead body rotting on the ground. They have to hurry up and go somewhere else, or it goes, into a river or off a cliff, or so they just can't like burn the body, for example, because that person has to come back at later adventures. And there's a handful of people that do that. So always keep that in mind too. So when they say this is a railroady module, it's much more railroady than DL1, but I think it gets worse later on. But it's not as bad as some people I think like to make it out to be. Yeah, uncertain screen wipe for sure. Because really, I mean, you need to have these characters later on, and you just can't have heroes going around killing everyone. And here's the other part of it that I think is really important. For the past week, I've been making characters with all my players for next week's Dergard Keep adventure module. And there's always these questions about, well, if I'm a good aligned character, I'm not really allowed to murder people. So once you defeat them, if they're lying on the ground, they're going to come back and get you later. And a couple of reasons why that wouldn't happen. One, healing in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is very difficult. It takes forever to heal. So if you didn't like murder the Draconian, for example, he just like passed out at 0 hit points and he's laying on the ground and you guys leave, assuming he's not, of course, doing his death effect. He's just going to get up and go limping away. He's not going to come back and fight you because he has no hit points. He has like 1 hit point at best. It would be stupid of him to come back and fight you. And that goes for any type of character. So they're just going to go and tell someone else. They're going to try to regroup with their main force or something like that. And then they're going to tell them who, they're ultimately going to send people after you. So as good players in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and all games, you don't have to literally murder people. That's not seen as a good thing. You just have to defeat them. And defeat can take the form in many different forms. It can just be they get dropped so many hit points from their total that they give up. They don't have the morale to stay in the fight anymore. And so they give up. You either tie them up and leave them or take their weapons and force them to march away or, however you deal with it. But you don't have to absolutely murder them. And if they do fall unconscious, again, you don't have to go up and stab them in the face because you're a good character. You defeated them already. You would just then move along. Maybe you'd take their gear so they can't, it would be harder for them to survive on their own, or they can't come back and get you later. But, they survive. So this whole mysterious death trope of these series of adventures isn't so unbelievable when it comes to good characters in a campaign versus evil. And most evil characters too, they're not going to murder you. Once they defeated you, they might leave you at 0, or they might leave you, sort of passed out. They're just going to move on to the next person. They're not going to focus on you to make sure that you're dead, sort of kicking you while you're passed out. They're just going to think, okay, he's down, move on to the next one. That's just how it works. That's why in like old school, actual real world battles, you would have multiple people living in pain, wounded, with massive like limbs missing or huge gashes in their body, moaning. Because in battle, you're only focused on the people who are standing trying to kill you, and then you move on. You don't sit here and focus on killing everyone. So always keep that, at least I always keep that in mind when I'm running characters through a game, because, typically with characters or players that I've played with in the past, they want to kill everything. And to get the experience to defeat them, you really don't have to kill people all the time. Sometimes you do, just the reality of it, but most times you don't. All right, so once they are freed by the elves from the slave train, they're taken into Qualinosti, into Qualinost, and they're shown the massive beauty that is Qualinost. And this is a moment for you to really dig into descriptions, sights, smells, sounds, everything, to really overwhelm the senses of the players, because none of these players except for Tanis has ever seen anything as beautiful as an elven city, especially an elven capital city. Like the plains of Abanasinia, those are like barbarian villages and huts and small towns, and even Haven, which is a large town and the largest capital of Abanasinia, that's a big town, but it's not beautiful like Qualinost. Nothing is. So you really dig into that aspect of it. And that's when they get the information dump about the reality of the dragon army. Because up until now, they've only been facing the sort of tertiary stuff of, well, the dragon army is not going to hurt anyone. They just want to get this staff that was stolen from their temple. Like that was the whole premise of the first adventure. This second adventure is very much just them learning the real severity of the Red Dragon army. First of all, they saw what happened in Solace, so they know they're not effing around. But now the Qualinosti elves literally are talking about leaving their homeland. That's how serious it is. So, the players are finally realizing, oh, this is open warfare. Like we thought this was a regional conflict, but now we realize the real stakes here are so much bigger than we ever thought. And you're encouraged not just to rescue the slaves from Pax Tharkas in order to stop the Red Dragon army from being able to mine and get, ore for weapons and armor, but also to save your neighbors, the people you grew up around, your childhood friends. They're all stolen from Solace and Abanasinia, Gateway and Haven as well. So you're really encouraged to go there no matter what. And there's a secret way in. There's a Sla-Mori that the elves know about. It's called the Hidden Path, which is very, very cool. What we learn in future novels is there's like Qualinost is littered with Sla-Moris, and not all elves even know where they all are because they've been around since the beginning. They're just magical pathways or they're literal tunnels that have been around since Ergoth owned the territory. So it's very interesting. There's actually a series of modules later where the Grey Gem of Gargath goes into one of those Sla-Moris under a tree of Zivlin, I think it is. And part of the point of it is you go in and you meet like this spirit of Kith Cannon in order to get the Grey Gem of Gargath out of one of these Sla-Moris in Qualinosti. Just a side note there. It's kind of interesting in my opinion. So once you are convinced that, yes, we are going to then go to Pax Tharkas, everyone's like, all right, well, let's everyone have a good night's sleep. In the morning, Gilthanas will take us to the Sla-Mori. He'll take us into Pax Tharkas, and together we'll liberate all of the slaves. This is where a massive deviation happens from the novel. So if you don't want to know it, leave. All right, I'm going to tell you. Lord Toad and a squad of Draconians, like 20 of them, a platoon, actually come into Qualinost and capture Laurana and take her away. So she does not like sneak up behind the companions and join them in the Sla-Mori at all. She's a captive of the Red Dragon army from go. Like, I was stunned when I read it. I was just like, wait a second, what? Which is great because it takes away the sort of awkward player, knowledge about the novels, forcing the weird relationship with an NPC going like, oh, well, I don't want you here. Go back home. It's like help is help. Why would you turn help away? It avoids all that. But what it does do is reinforce the need in the players to get their Tukuses to Pax Tharkas so they can save Laurana too, especially Tanis. So it gives you more motivation to complete the railroad that was set in front of you. And it makes Toda infinitely more powerful because he's riding a wyvern into Qualinosti, mocking everyone, picking up the princess of the Qualinosti people and popping smoke. It makes him such a cooler character to me. I've always had like this love-hate relationship with Toda because he just like fails upward in his career. And then he just ultimately fails upward by becoming immortal for a while, which is insane. But like he's much more effective and powerful than I think we give him credit for. You kind of treat the adventure timeline as separate from the novels. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Can't wait to see the players take on Verminard. Well, guess what? That's another change. So be prepared for that. So now Laurana is taken. The heroes wake up immediately the next morning, realize, after they defeated the Draconians, that the platoon that was invading in order to create the distraction so that Toda could steal Laurana, kidnap her. The heroes are now going to Sla-Mori with renewed focus and fervent urgency because they want to, they don't want Toda to do something untoward to the elven princess. And look, if I'm a bad guy and you got Laurana there, if I'm already doing bad things, yeah, you can bet there's going to be bad things happening. That's like, that's what they do. So yeah, they're all freaking out. So you've got to get your butts to the Sla-Mori and through it as fast as possible. However, the Sla-Mori is infinitely bigger than in the novel, and there are so much bad things in there. Not just a giant slug, though that's there too. There's so many dead things and scary things in that Sla-Mori that you have to work your way through. And even though Gilthanas is there, he doesn't tell you the right way the whole way because he doesn't know. All he knows is that this Sla-Mori leads into Pax Tharkas. And so you kind of have to work your way dungeon crawling. And that's where the adventure goes from, just like DL1, from an overland adventure into a pure dungeon crawl experience all the way to the very end of the module. Because not just are you dungeon crawling through the Sla-Mori into Pax Tharkas, then you're dungeon crawling through Pax Tharkas. Once you get into Pax Tharkas, you do ultimately meet up with the mothers and the women, and then you can go in and see all the children there. And your goal is not to defeat Verminard, because before you even get to the Sla-Mori, you see the gates of Pax Tharkas open, and the military force that's going to be destroying Qualinosti is leaving Pax Tharkas. So that gives you the freedom to move around Pax Tharkas because the military force is already gone. They're not going to be there, sort of like hovering over you the whole time. They do suggest you do the whole dress like a woman thing so you can get into the children, so you can liberate the children, which then allows the women to want to leave, which then allows the men to want to leave. But it is very much a to B to C type situation. But there's a lot of other stuff in Pax Tharkas you can discover too. Not just that chain in the gallery room with all the pictures and paintings and stuff, but all sorts of really interesting different encounters that can be had there. There's also a chance for you multiple chances for Verminard to discover you and send his dragon Ember after you, which is terrifying because again, I think you're like 3rd level or 4th level or something like that at this point. Against a dragon is just scary. Yeah, you defeated Chrysanth. She's a black dragon. This is a red dragon. There's slight power difference between the two, especially when you're just such low-level characters in AD&D. Like one breath weapon can decimate an entire party, like a TPK for sure, if you just roll poorly. So you have to be very, very tactical about how you maneuver around Pax Tharkas so you're not discovered. But there's also a whole sequence of gully dwarf encounters that you can run into. And gully dwarves are really great in Zaxxaroth. Like every time you sort of ran into a new group of gully dwarves, because there was like 3 different clans in Zaxxaroth, they were doing different things and sort of interacting in different silly ways, and sort of it's an opportunity to add fun. In the gully dwarves, there's certain encounters where the gully dwarves will outright attack you. But as soon as you attack back, they just drop their weapons, hands in the air, scream, and run away. So they're not real threats. They're just sort of like, they're slaves too, They're being mistreated by the dragon army as well. So they're just doing what they feel like they're supposed to do. But they don't want to die. They choose life like I do. So they just scream and run away. I feel like I'd be a gully dwarf. I would not want to die in Pax Tharkas. That'd be a terrible place to die. So once you get the kids out, then you get the mothers out, and then, of course, the men will all leave. And that's really when, as soon as you get the kids out, that's when is it Maidaflor? Oh, I can't remember now. The dragon that is watching the children, she's like this ancient, sort of senile, blind dragon. As soon as you start moving the kids, she immediately realizes something's wrong because she can smell that you're not the women. You got that musk that men have, that male musk, for the male characters anyway. And let's be honest. I mean, Goldmoon hasn't washed. When has she been able to have a bath? They did, you would have had a bath in Qualinosti, except Lord Toda invaded. So she's probably just as funky as the dudes. And I don't know about you, but I just imagine in my head, Flint is a stinky mofo. I don't know why. Just in my head, him and Caravan probably just funk up every tent they've ever been in. That's why everyone else sleeps under the stars. Because it's just like man musk is just too much to handle. Anyway, the dragon realizes that you're not who you're supposed to be. And so she immediately freaks out. And it's about that time that Lord Verminard is going to leave to join his military forces. And he sees the dragon burst out. He sees all the slaves and he's like, that's it. I'm putting my foot down. I'm going to kill every one of you people. But the dragon comes up and attacks Ember first. And so it's this massive dragon battle that's happening outside of everything that you, the PCs, are doing. So you never have to actually fight Verminard, and you're never really given an opportunity to, unless you choose to do it inside of Pax Tharkas when you're trying to get the kids out. Totally your choice, not a part of the module. He plays a huge part in the next 2 modules, and then in future modules way down the line. So does Lord Tota too. So you're going to meet him when you try to get all the slaves into Thorbarden, and then you're going to meet him again in Thorbarden. So Lord Verminard is not a one-hit wonder in the modules at all. It's very, very cool. And so once you get the heroes or the people out, that's the module. That's it. So the big set pieces for adventuring are getting captured in Solace area or Abanasinia, being taken down to Qualinesti, being rescued, meeting Qualinesti, learning about that nation and the severity that it finds itself in, and then going into the Sla-Mori, working your way through the Sla-Mori, then getting into Pax Tharkas and figuring out a way to get everyone out of Pax Tharkas, liberate the slaves. That's it. So you will have encounters, but it's not like the novel at all. I mean, it's very, very different. And you may not save Laurana. She's another one of those that if Laurana dies, it's got to be mysterious because we need a golden general later on. So don't kill her in this. It's very, very cool. Okay, so the one of the sort of a series of standout features about this module. The first 25 encounters, which take up more than half of the adventure, are all events that players must resolve as they move through the adventure's main plot. A few adventures had lightly used events of this sort prior to Dragons of Flame, but the number of them in Dragons of Flame and the way that they're used to shape the complete narrative was an unprecedented move for modules back in the day. No one did modules like Dragonlance did them. And so you'll have elements that you find in other modules, but nothing like this. Its use of NPC capsules, like little blocks of NPC stats, and then a blurb underneath it about the NPC for the DM to understand the motivations, the brief history, and how to play them, that was completely new. That never happened before. So it provided complete stats for NPCs and some background on who they were. It's also easy to find thanks to the use of the shaded box, which is where it had all that brief information. So it was easy for the DM to know where that information is when you need it. This level of attention to NPCs was wildly unusual for the period. Just a few years previously, in adventures like T1, The Village of Hamlet from 1979, NPCs didn't even have names. And now they have whole backstories. So as far as like a story narrative, it's a completely new way of telling stories in D&D. The Dragons of Flame moves slightly south in its exploration of Abanasinia to include the elven lands of Qualinosti and the fortress of Pax Tharkas, the so-called Citadel of Peace. Well, it was for a long time, but what are you going to do? Red Dragon Army comes knocking, and it's going to change its tune. This is also the first look at these lands, and also the first look at Qualinosti elven culture. The Kapak Draconians. This is the first time they show up in any Dragonlance module. And here's something that I found interesting. In its description of Sturm, Brightblade, it said he has a motto, and his motto is Perunde ok Cadaver, which means obedience until death. I'd never heard of that before. It's never referenced in any novel. It's never referenced in any other module that I've seen thus far. So I was like sort of stunned. I never thought of Sturm. That's like a paladin's fervent religious, sort of way of looking at life. And they're saying that Sturm had that like from go. I was a little bit surprised by that. Funk, you thought the spell prestidigitation and it covered? Hey Adam, thanks for tuning in live. Yeah, that would actually be a good use for that spell. 100%. I just thought it was weird. Like, why not just do Es Solaris Oth Mythas? Why create a whole new sort of phrase in Solamnic that has never been referenced before? We'll have to see if it's referenced later when I get to the future modules, but Yeah, sounds kind of cool. And then, of course, Lorana being kidnapped by Lord Toad threw me for a loop. I had no idea. And the fact that you don't even fight Lord Verminard at all. I was just like, huh, that changes the end to being like this massive, fight the big bad guy to now you're just running. It's a bit of a letdown. Like the big set piece is watching two massive dragons fighting each other. That's the big thing. But you trigger that by taking the children and then Lord Verminard noticing you, which makes the two dragons collide, but you don't really get involved at all. So your last combat is basically if you get caught in Pax Tharkas, and then it's just a couple guards or something. Other than that, you're just narratively getting the hell out of Dodge. Which, all right, if that's the thing, then that's the thing. But I just expected a big battle, and there isn't one. So that is DL2 Dragons of Flame. I got to tell you, as far as like rating it, I think it's a great adventure. It's not as railroady as future modules are going to be out of necessity, but it is still pretty railroady. But it's within the bounds of if you're getting together with a bunch of friends in order to play a module, there's a built-in understanding that there's a beginning and an end, and that you have to eventually get to the end to complete the module. And so the players are kind of willing to be directed and steered by the events that occur in the adventure. It's up to the DM to make that railroading as soft as possible and allow the players as much leeway as possible within the confines of the adventure to then redirect them a little bit if they get off course. And this module does give you some examples of how to do that, in situations where they need it. But that's why it's so important for the players to consider playing the heroes of the lance so that they have motivation reasons for going in these directions, like rescuing their friends and neighbors from Solace or Lorana herself. So I didn't find it as railroady as people make it out to be, but it is still kind of railroady. What are you going to do? It's a module. All modules are. So I think it was a great adventure. I can't wait to run through it with players, especially through Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of frustration too, but I think that's kind of part of the fun, because if you're used to modern editions of the game, then going back to older editions forces you to appreciate the modern versions more, even though I don't particularly enjoy the modern versions much. Those who love them definitely appreciate them more after having played older editions, because it's harder. It forces you to think more and to consider more and to use tactics more. And I love that. All right. So Lord Toto was a true hero of Dragonlance. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Possibly. He certainly helps the heroes later on. So maybe. Thanks for tuning in. Circuits. I don't know. I probably butchered it. Sorry. Endurius, thanks for tuning in. Chris, thanks for tuning in. All right, guys, that's it. That's my review. I can't wait to play it. It's not as detailed and like immense of a scope as I thought it might be. It's a quick 3 to 4 session game, and I'm excited for it. So if you guys want to see it, I'm going to be running it here in about a month or something like that. That's going to do it for my review. Hey, Engine Joe, how you doing, man? That's going to do it for my review of DL2 Dragons of Flame by Douglas Niles. What did you think of the changes from the novel in the module? Is it necessary? How do you feel about the concept of slavery being used in a wartime game? Are your modern sensibilities triggered by that? Would you modify it if they are? And how would you modify it? I think the reality is everyone has different sensibilities in life. It doesn't mean any one sensibility is better or worse. We're just all individuals and we have our own takes on life. So I find it interesting to hear how those who are bothered by things that I'm not bothered by at all would adapt adventures so that they're not bothered by it anymore. Or conversely, would you make it more severe so that there's more grit and grime and more at stake? And then, of course, what do you think about the idea of mysterious deaths? Do you think that's BS and you just say, screw it, I'm going to adjust future modules if we kill them, or just ignore it altogether? Let me know in the comments below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga. Thank you so much for joining in that celebration. So, for DragonLance Saga, my name is Adam. Until next time, Sla-Mori.